Good afternoon, CleoCon. Did everyone have a nice lunch? Yes. It's kind of weird when you put it this way, but we are 1/4 of the way through CleoCon already. I think that's kind of scary, but that does mean we still have a lot coming up in front of us. My name is Alex Trapillo. I'm Clio's VP of Growth Marketing. I'm going to start off by being super annoying and suggesting, not asking, but suggesting, there's so many people at the back, and I promise you that it's not drafty up here, there's no bad smell or anything. Like, if you feel excited to just grab your stuff and move a little bit closer to the front, I promise you it will create a better workshop experience. You're not in like a keynote room where there's 10,000 people here and you're sitting in the back. So come on forward if you feel like it. And just maybe a subtle nudge to fill up this front space up here. So I want to talk a little bit about what we have today. I'm super excited for this session because, as I mentioned, I'm Clio's VP of Growth Marketing. And one thing that I think about a lot is Clio's online presence. And as part of our marketing efforts, we produce a lot of content on all kinds of different topics, on how to better run your law firm, how to start a law firm, how to use data and insights to run your law firm. And the single most desirable piece of content, the thing that we see lawyers downloading, asking for, researching the most, is all about marketing. So we know that it's a really important topic. It's one that lawyers want to learn more about. And that's why I'm so excited to have Mark and Jamie here from GNGF, Get Noticed, Get Found, because they are experts in law firm marketing. That's all that they do every single day. And they work with many, many law firms across the US and Canada. And even more excited for me to have a workshop where we can actually work through some practical takeaways for each of you. So without further ado, please join me in a big round of applause for Mark and Jamie to kick off this workshop. And let's get them up here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. By the way, everybody, being a speaker, a lot of times when I speak, you kind of like come in hot with slides and you're like, okay, hey, here's the thumb drive and do whatever. Clio like really has their act together. I don't know, we had like 8 Zoom calls with Alex and like had to send the slides like a month ago, these PDFs they printed off for us and everything. So if everybody just, quick applause for Alex. I probably doesn't hear that often, but Michaela and Alex were great in helping us get all this going and keeping us organized. So I appreciate that because we probably would have done that whole, here's the thumb drive. We go to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about myself. Mark Homer, I'm the founder and CEO of Get Noticed, Get Found, or GNGF, as Alex mentioned. I've kind of been at the intersection of marketing and technology for quite some time. I actually was at a small technology firm called IBM back in like the early 90s. And there was this little thing that happened called like the World Wide Web in the early 90s. And there was a thing where like if you hired IBM, it was probably safe. So we got hired to like build a lot of these websites for, small companies like General Motors and Toyota and stuff. So literally been, my search engine optimization back in the day was putting the website link into Yahoo's directory listing. So I've been around for a while. And around 11 years ago, I stumbled into doing marketing just for law firms. So started GNGF about 11 years ago, and we've been doing this, like I said, clients all over US and Canada, mostly online focus though, so heavy digital online focus, which if you came to the presentation, you're in the right place. We do have a book, Online Law Practice Strategies, copy over here. And I do have, there's piece of paper. If not, I have some extra ones here. You can go catch us at our booth. If you want a copy of that, we'll send it to you. It's like $50, but because you came here, Clio's helping us get that out to everybody. So fill it out. Everything we're covering here, the book probably goes in just a little bit more detail. I know it's like almost a 2-hour session. It seems like, how are you going to talk about this for 2 hours? And there's even more information in the book. So we've got a lot of stuff there. I'm also a co-host of a podcast, so please check us out. Your law firm is a business, take it to the next level, and just a lot more. So one thing unique about me though, because I always think this is fun, right? Speakers don't talk about something unique to them. I've survived a plane crash. Right? It's kind of cool, right? So I heard a couple like, oh, what? Now, the irony's not lost on me. because I was trying to do this. So I was actually trying to jump out of the plane, and the plane crashed. So I actually failed in this scenario. So, but yeah, if you buy me a drink later, I'll tell you the story. It's kind of a fun story. But I'll pass it over to our marketing and partner manager.
Yeah. So as Mark said, my name's Jamie Coles, and I am the marketing and partnership manager at GNGF. I started in a non-traditional route coming to GNGF, I guess. I do have a degree in marketing, but also I went to law school. So I do have my JD. And then after law school, I decided maybe my skills are better put use towards tech. So I joined GNGF about 2 years ago now. And since then, I've kind of had a couple different roles within the company. I used to be project manager. So I worked with our law firm clients on a daily basis. And then as I began at GNGF, we actually started the Legal Marketing Academy, which is a group of attorneys who are just like beginning the stages of marketing their law firm and beginning to think of their law firm as a business. And we kind of help them through that with guidance from our PMs, our AMs. We're all in there giving guidance on how to do marketing on a daily basis. And then recently I stepped up into the position of marketing and partnership manager for GNGF. And then Chase College of Law is the law school that I went to. A little bit about me. I am a Division I athlete. I actually played volleyball at NKU, which is also where Chase is. That's my secretary when we were in the pandemic. He handled all my doorbell rings. He was on it. And that's just my graduation from Chase.
So as we mentioned, I highly recommend you grab a copy of the book because, like, you could go on Amazon and pay $50. I'd be totally fine with that. But you can go to the URL and grab it, or fill out the form, and we'll give you the book. Of course, because we're really good at online marketing, you can learn how a really good online marketing company does a drip campaign as well, right? So you'll probably get some emails from us when you fill it out. So let's talk about our process that we've built over the last 11 years called the GNGF Way. We've built a process that we feel kind of is a foundational strategy for approaching your marketing, especially when it comes to online marketing. A lot of today, we're gonna be focusing on the kind of like knowing your numbers section. We're gonna be getting into numbers and what metrics you should be thinking about and KPIs. And I'm hoping if you're doing this workshop and you're doing some of the other workshop tracks, I do know April and Tyler from Nomos Marketing are doing one on marketing strategy, and they are amazing, good friends of ours, and take a lot of the stuff here and the metrics and the numbers and think about it tonight. And I would recommend going to that, and kind of like some of these metrics and numbers may help give you some guidance when you're working through that workshop. So when we talk about our GNGF Way, we start with the first thing is protecting your referrals. So protecting your referrals is because, we do marketing and we hear all the time, it's like, I get all my stuff from referrals. I don't need any marketing, right? So what we've realized, and you saw in the Legal Trends report for now multiple years, people go online to look for lawyers, believe it or not. So what happens is people go online, whether they were referred or not, they type your name, and what do you see? Right? So protecting referrals is all about just making sure that if somebody types your name in, that your web presence looks okay, right? Reviews are good, that they're not finding somebody else's listing, somebody's not advertising on your name and you don't realize it, that kind of stuff. Then we get into branding. We're gonna talk about branding today a little bit, so we are gonna touch on like branding. I think it's really important to understand who you are, why you do what you do. If I don't know if anybody went to Mark Britton's talk, and he talked about building a moat and pyramids and stuff. And so this idea of branding, I think, is great. We'll get into that. And this is going to be hands-on, by the way. I'm not going to be talking the whole time, so you can clap about that. But yeah, we're going to have literally time to think through your brand, ask us questions. We've seen it and heard it all. So we'll get into branding. Then you've got communicating your brand. We're not going to spend too much time there. I'm going to recommend that there's a lot of online components to communicating your brand you should be thinking of, but there's other places you're going to communicate your brand. But then we are going to spend a lot of time on the metrics. So we'll jump over there. check.
Yeah. As Mark said, we really can't talk about the numbers without understanding who we are in our landscape, and it's different for every law firm. So at GNGF, we have what's called the P&C pipeline, and it's basically the understanding that there's so many things that contribute to our leads and our website, and it's not just a one-note kind of effort anymore. So when it comes to marketing a law firm, you have to understand which parts affect your numbers. And it might be that it's your SEO efforts. It might be that your email drip campaign has a kink in it or something. And understanding what is affecting your numbers can help you make strategic adjustments as you go along. So first, what we want to know is who you are to your consumer, right? And without understanding who we are to the consumer, we can't really tell the consumer why they need us and why they shouldn't choose the person down the street. So with that, we want to exhibit like effective communication. Is communication of value in us, in our firm? So we want to ask those questions about what makes us unique to our consumer and to our clients that they might not get if they go down the street or to the person who's paying the big bucks on the ads.
Yeah, and that's defining brand for a law firm. People like sometimes get stuck here, and so what you end up seeing is everybody has the same brand, right? So I'm going to mention things, and you may think that this is your brand. Okay, I bet you care, right? People are caring. You care about your clients. You have experience. You know, like so. All these, like everybody can say that, right? So you don't have a unique brand if everybody has the same thing. So you need to really kind of dig in, like, what do you care about more than somebody else? The one I love on branding, and we'll get to, some of these questions, but is like, what do you just rail against? What just bugs the heck out of you that you're like, and like, that's the thing that you need to be kind of, maybe there's some brand in there, right? There's something that I care about that other people may feel differently. I'll give you an example. We had a client who, had actually moved their practice from one state all the way, halfway across the country to another state, which is hard, right? Starting in, say to, get barred and get a practice started from scratch. And so we spent a lot of time on branding, and they were family law. So like, okay, family law, do a lot of divorce work. Okay, great. And so we really dug into what do you like? Who are your typical clients? What clients did you love? What really bugged you about the process? And we came down to the fact that he's like, the client that, when I'm just the happiest is when I get to upset a standard that's just wrong. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, there are professional women who make good money, and in a divorce, they still have all the duties that, the mom's gonna end up having majority of the kids and that kind of stuff, but they get screwed in the money because they make all the money. They're like, you don't need any money. You don't need any support. You don't need all this. And so he goes, I fight for that person. I'm like, okay, that's unique, right? So I can build, all of the content, the communication, the brand messaging. I mean, you can think about the imagery, right? The imagery is going to be very different if that's all I'm talking to as a brand, right? That's very different than just family law and, we're pulling kids apart or something like that you see on your websites, right? So that's what I mean by thinking about your brand as something different and unique. The other thing I would challenge you, and Jim, you brought this up the other day when we were even talking about our stuff, is if somebody else isn't going to say the opposite, it might not be a strong, unique point, right? Mm-hmm. Like nobody's going to go out and say, we don't care about clients. Right? So caring about clients isn't that unique then, right? So really think about something that somebody else may actually have a different approach to, like representing the males in a situation where there's a professional woman might be somebody else's jam, right? So that's something about thinking about when we're talking about who you are as a law firm. And we're going to get more detail. I'll let you take it away.
Yeah. So this is going to be the first point in which we're going to refer to our workbook that's in front of you. And we're going to take some time to go through those questions and try to give more than a surface level answer because they're going to try to challenge your personality as a firm. And especially with solo practitioners, I think that it's hard to sometimes dissociate yourself from the actual firm. So don't be afraid to say that your firm stands for something or has a unique personality, because that's where you're going to differentiate from your competitors. So I want you to start brainstorming about maybe where those points of differentiation lie, and those questions will kind of guide you through that exercise.
But while people are doing that, and I recommend we're going to take about 3 minutes, okay? Because we have a lot to cover, and 3 minutes is not a lot of time, but I want you to just start thinking about this. But while you're doing that, if anybody has a question like, hey, like how would I deal with this for my brand, or what about that, or something, like just, raise your hand, and we'll kind of just workshop it real fast, right?
Yep.
Like, I've seen and talked to hundreds and hundreds of firms. We've got hundreds of clients, right? Like we've done this a few times. And I, maybe can help ask a couple questions or a couple leading questions that then find something underlying. If anybody wants to just dig in, let me know. Yeah. All right, that was time for branding. It was just, again, this is thought. Get your thoughts going. Carry this into. I just realized that April and Tyler were here. Hey, so carry it into their session. I recommend people go to session. And then any more questions? If you have questions about any of the stuff we're going to cover, we do have a booth here, so just stop by, grab one of us. We just love talking about this stuff anyway, so we'll probably, just buy me a beer and we'll keep talking about it. So, all right, want to go in directories?
Absolutely.
All right. So directories, directories are interesting. So when we talked about protecting your referrals, this is one of those areas where I'm like, just do some of these things, the basics right. In every market, there's going to be directories, and if you search like, wills near me, divorce attorney near me, or whatever, right? You're going to see a bunch of listings that aren't any law firm, but it's some other, as Mark Britton's talked about today, it's another intermediary, between you and your client, right? And so these directories are out there. By the way, I'm not saying these are the important directories. I'm just kind of giving an example. You've probably heard of directories. Sorry.
These were actually identified by Clio in one of their blog articles.
Yeah, so what I recommend for directories is, well, first of all, you need to make sure you have your stuff right and consistent on the directories. But if you Google the keywords that matter in your area, and do it, by the way, in your area. So if you're doing it from here, like it's better to do it like, oh, these are where the clients that I want to go after live. I'm going to go there with my phone and search on, like divorce attorney near me or whatever, and then see what directories come up on like the first 3 or 4 scrolls of your phone, or first 3 pages of Google, and just worry about those directories in the beginning. Just trying to make it easy on you. Because you know what, Avvo may not even show up in the first 3 pages. They may be the first result. It's so different every market. Expertise.com and Thumbtack show up all the time, and they're not even on this list, right? So.
And by do it in your area, he actually means like go sit in your office. Like Google kind of can tell where you're searching from. So the results are going to be different if you're in Nashville searching. Even if you put in Cincinnati or in Seattle, they're going to be different here than they will be when you're in your office.
Yeah, and then like I said, like in your office is one thing, but if your target market is like 4 suburbs away, because that's the wealthy clients or whatever, go sit there. Yeah, go to Starbucks. But you can go to a couple tools here that we have. Moz is a great tool. I'm trying to give you some tools that are free that you guys can go off and work with. Obviously, agencies like us would have our own tools we pay for and that are unique to agencies that we get to use and play with. But this is a free one. Moz Local. Enter your information in. It's going to show you like how kind of clean you are in your directories. Again, this isn't like make or break. You're not going to suddenly show up on the search results because you do the directories, but you could kind of hurt yourself if you don't. So it's not that it's going, there's like table stakes, I guess, right? You've heard that term, right? So this is like table stakes to make sure your directories are clean. Get your, check your, essentially check the health, right? So check the health and just make sure it's super consistent.
Yep.
So it's just so easy to say, Lane versus LN and that kind of stuff. And it used to be, you had to be like perfect.
Yep.
It could be a little bit looser now. Search engines got a little bit smarter, but still just trying to make it consistent. But we just talked about branding and some of that. That's where people, I think, go wrong. They get to the thing, they type in their address, they type in stuff, and it says description. And they're like, divorce law firm. And they move on, right? We spend all this time on branding and coming up with good ideas, and we working on a website and stuff, and then like take some of that stuff you do and use that same consistent, good-facing message, because they're going here. It's the first time they ran into you was not via Google, it was because of Avvo or lawyers.com or something. Or like I said, expertise.com, Thumbtack, which is crazy to me that like they show up all the time for lawyers. And it's like, I think a Thumbtack is like my HVAC person, but like I know lawyers that do really well on Thumbtack. And if anybody doesn't even know what Thumbtack is, go look it up. If it's in your market, maybe check it out. So this is next workshop is essentially really thinking through your directories, consistent information. So just take a couple minutes if you want to Google, write down a few things, think about what your firm is.
And for this one, something to keep in mind is there's like a couple of things that I feel like are pitfalls for attorneys when it comes to directories. State your firm name in all your directories the same way. So if I am Coles Law, I'm not going to say Coles Law one time and then Coles Law Firm the next time and Coles Law PLC the next time. Be consistent on every single directory. It'll benefit you in the long run. And then also we always talk about like opportunities for outsourcing, and it is attainable and productive if you want to spend a couple like minutes a week going through to some of these directories and correcting your information and making sure it's up to date. But if that's not something that you think is a value of your time, you can consider using a data provider, and a data provider is going to allow you to free up your time to work on other things, and then they will actually go through and just correct your directories online and make sure they're up to date based on the credentials that you give them.
Yeah, and there's services out there if you
Yeah.
type like, I need help doing my directory listings. Whitespark's a good one. Moz Local will try to sell you something. I'm sure if you put your information in there, they're going to drip you something as well.
Yep.
Again, table stakes, don't walk out of here and say, Mark said if I do directories, I'm going to crush it online. Because it's just something you have to do. It sucks, it's mundane, it's boring. All I'm saying is if you're walking out of here and going to do anything, just look at your first 3 results in your market and just start with those directories and then move on and then come back to this later. So.
And not only correcting directories, but creating them. Like if you don't show up on a directory, put your name on that directory. Yeah. I think there was a question over here.
Yeah, I just had a question about when you say run your Google search
Yes.
to see what's there. Do you suggest doing that under an incognito search?
Yeah, I mean, if you are if you're in your office, certainly I would recommend doing incognito search. And to be honest, I think it's safer to do incognito search. A lot of people don't know what that is, so I often kind of say just start with the Googling. Incognito search, basically, you've probably searched your own law firm 1,000 times because we all search our own name and businesses just to see, right? So Google's going to start going, oh, this person really likes this law firm. So I'm going to show them this law firm whenever and so you go somewhere else, you're like, oh, my law firm shows up. Look, I'm awesome. And then nobody else can see your law firm, right? It's because they kind of like learned that about you. What we're saying here is an incognito mode on your browser is going to kind of like get rid of like all that kind of cookie history and stuff. And that's going to be a better way to see a more pure result of what maybe a consumer who's never searched for this term in the past has done. And by the way, most people searching these terms have never searched in the terms before, right? Like you guys do this all the time. It's the first time that they've ever had this problem. Think about most of your clients out there. You see them once, right? And that's the first time they've ever had this issue. So thank you. That's a really good point about incognito.
Is there any other questions? One of the other pitfalls that I actually find is pretty common is when you're stating your address, either spell out avenue or don't spell out avenue. Like pick one. Same thing with like street and suites. Yes. Like are you using the number sign or using suite? Just when in doubt, be consistent. Write it somewhere and do it that way every single time.
Yeah, and this used to be a really big deal.
Yeah.
Like 5 years ago, if you had like the numbers wrong and that kind of stuff, like, Google would like kind of go, I'm confused. I'm just not going to show you at all. Now they're a little more forgiving, and this is more about seeing what directories are showing up so that if you were not there, get listed, because if somebody goes to that directory, at least hopefully they find you that way if you didn't show up in the Google search. So, and we'll get to that later. Right.
Yep. Okay. So now we know who we are, right? We've identified our brand. And then we said, we're going to put that out there on the internet in directories, and we're going to be consistent about it. But now we need to know who we're selling to. So the ideal client avatar is what we call it in the academy, is something that we develop based on our years of practice or who we want to sell to. It's not necessarily who you see walk in the door every day. It's who ideally you would like to see walk in the door every day. Who's going to be the most profitable client? Who's going to be someone you enjoy working with? Like, you can be kind of idealistic about it and then work from there, because that's going to be your ultimate goal. And when we're defining it, we want to be very precise. We want to look at all these types of demographics. We want to look at age, gender, like socioeconomic class, maybe even like particular job that they have, depending on what kind of practice you're practicing in. And then we want to direct our marketing efforts always with our ideal client avatar in mind. If we're taking cases that don't necessarily align with our ideal client avatar, that's okay. That's part of growing. But our goal is to get to a point where maybe we're only dealing with those, or majority of our clients are those ideal client avatars.
That's a really good point. The idea of, because I get this pushback a lot. It's like, well, I can't just be that brand, and I can't just take that client, else I wouldn't have a business. It's fine. Like we're not saying you can't. Just saying, like, over time you will, if you put it out there and say, this is what I'm targeting, this is what I'm focusing, here's the brand messaging to those people, and you keep that in mind all the time. The first year it's a little rough. Second year gets a little better. Third year, we have clients now who are literally getting to kind of pick the cases they want with those ideal clients in mind. So not only are cases coming in, but most of the cases coming in are the ones that they said they wanted to work on 5 years ago. It didn't happen overnight, but you work your way to it. If you keep that in mind with all your messaging, right? So one of the reasons we want the ideal customers, when you write content, when you write an email, when you send a letter out, when you work with somebody like for a billboard or a magazine, whatever you're going to do for your marketing, you're talking to that person. And so we use the term client avatar. It's like kind of a marketing term we may have heard. But essentially we get to the point where we almost kind of like put a name with it, right? It's like, Jane Smith, is, female, ages this range, loves driving RAV4s, whatever, I don't know, so you really kind of get into the mind of like this person. So you're talking to them all the time. And if that is the person you want to work with, and you're talking to them all the time on your website, they're going to gravitate. Like that's going to be noticed. How many of you have gone on a website and you just look at the website right away and go, that's not for me, and then you're out? But the company's making money. You know that they're busy. You could walk into a restaurant, right, and go, this is not for me, right? But it's for somebody, right? So you can have a target. It's okay to repel some people. It's so scary in the beginning, and I get it. And we're not saying you don't have to take these clients. I'm just saying it's okay to start writing and putting it out there that you aren't just for everybody. Okay. So even the point of I do a lot of practice areas, but I do a lot of practice areas for this ideal client, right? That's okay. So in this next section, really think about that. And psychographics. So I'll give you an example. People think it's crazy. I go to marketing conferences and we speak on search engine optimization and social media and stuff at more marketing conferences. They're like, you just work with lawyers? Like that? Can you run an agency just on lawyers? I'm like, well, it's actually not lawyers. It's typically lawyers that understand they're running a business, and that's part of our psychographic. And typically it's 2 to 20 lawyers, because once you get to a certain size, you start getting a marketing department, and we don't want to compete against the marketing department. We like to be the outsourced team, right? So I've actually niched my niche down to the psychographic, who the ideal client is. If we get on the phone with somebody and they don't understand that they're running a business, then we're gonna have a hard time talking about why marketing is important, right? So it's when you're there, give us a call later, right? So we've even thought through the psychographics of our ideal client. So that's where you want to start getting to. So my biggest thing here is just start writing it down, and then it'll start percolating, and then you'll start hearing you'll see somebody else speak and go, oh yeah, no, actually, I kind of like that too. Let me write that down too. Right? Mm-hmm. By the way, general counsel, I'm going to give you guys a tip right now. I don't know if we're getting too much content, but lawyers are typically I won't say all. We're in the right audience. I love coming to Clio because most people have already bought the Kool-Aid that I'm in business and I need to be listening to marketing speak. But a lot of lawyers like to write initially with, I want to impress people with my lawyering. And unless your client's avatar is a general counsel, right? And there may be a couple other minor things, but unless you're talking to a lawyer, Nobody wants to be impressed by your lawyering words. They want to know you can solve their problem. And then that's when we get to, we switch from my ideal client. I think we get into this a little bit about what is their problem. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But like that's when you, so it's not just, the reason we're doing this, right, is like when I understand my ideal client, I can switch in my back of my head and kind of go, hey, what is the problem they have, and how do I tell them via content, via social media, via video, via whatever, imagery, that I understand your problem, I care, I can solve it, and here's how I go about solving it.
And Mark, if you don't mind, there's a great example I have of this. So when we work with attorneys on creating content, a word that typically has some things hanging on it for attorneys is the word accident, right? So car accident. We hate the word accident, especially if we're defense. Like, it's not an accident. So when we're marketing, though, if somebody gets in a car accident or a car crash or a car collision, whatever you want to call it, what are they searching in Google? Because that's the words we have to use on our page. And then we can correct them from there if we really want to. But we really do need to talk to them where they're at instead of, like, we're not in court. Like, we can say this now and then correct the terminology for court.
Yeah, that's a good one. The accident collisions, yeah.
So I think I understand the ideal client avatar. And if you're looking at, like, I think the question earlier was about if there's different practices that you do, right? So I left a firm that had like 90 attorneys and started my own last year, which has been going really well. But to keep the lights on, I'm going into estate planning and real estate closing because they're quick transactions and they actually turn out to be really fun to do. But all my experience is med mal and personal injury. So now I have those 4 practice areas that we do, and I have paralegals that run the divisions. So I can see I'm writing a blog post, I'm doing content marketing. Here's my ideal client for med mal, which is different from a real estate closing, right?
Yep.
How would I combine that on like a home page, like the hero image on the main landing page?
Yeah. You have thoughts? Because I can keep rambling.
Okay. My thoughts. So on the homepage, typically, and if we're not going to do separate sites that work together and we're going to lead them into separate sites, you would probably play a little bit more neutral on your homepage. But your marketing efforts and your SEO is actually going to lead them to the separate landing pages. So you're going to try to push your efforts for those specific things. So like if your social media post is for your malpractice clients, and then you're going to push them to the actual malpractice landing page instead of your homepage, and like kind of funnel them that way and kind of skip past your homepage. But if people are finding you organically, they should be able to know from your homepage that you do all of those areas.
Basically, if I understand what you're saying, use the homepage as a launching point to possibly 4 landing pages that funnels them into those particular.
Yeah, so that's a great approach. So the initial question, in case it didn't get picked up, was if you have a few different practice areas, you essentially kind of have different client avatars possibly for those practice areas because you're not really, narrowing these practice areas to this type of community. But you, like you said, I'm doing these things because I can run the business that way while I'm building this other business. It's fine, like I said, this is a multi-year journey here. The question was like, how do you deal with the homepage when you have that? And I think Jamie's point here was create the Google's often going to take people to a deeper page in your website if they're searching on a particular topic. So you're going to be safe there. On the homepage, keep it more generic, just let them know that you're doing it. And the only other challenge I would add is, where do you want to go? Do you want to always be doing that? And if so, that's fine. But if you want an ideal client, then really try to get as much writing to them and say, oh, by the way, we do this, in the beginning, just that really deep, like your real estate page or whatever, should be really strong. And if somebody ends up there with Google or somebody gets referred to you and they see that, that's great. But eventually you could cut that and everything else still lives if that's not what you want to do. So again, think of this as a few years, not tomorrow. Like you're not shutting down all this stuff tomorrow, but think about where you want to go. And we probably need to get moving because.
Yes. Okay. So after we kind of take a step back and think about who our ideal client customer is, we're also going to now consider our competitive landscape. And Online, it's kind of easy to see who your actual competitors are. Google makes it really easy. They put it all on the same page. Page one is your best friend when you're trying to figure out who your competition is. So first, when you're viewing your competitors, you will actually see local service ads. And these are people who are spending a little bit of money with Google on ads that are geared towards their practice area in their location. And it actually like verifies that you're an attorney. It uses your license number and everything. So they're pretty like sound clicks for people feel reliable. And then second, you're going to see more ads, but these are just paid ads and they're bidding on these ads. So they might pay a range of money depending on how high of a keyword that is and how high the volume is for that keyword. But these are probably going to be your big spenders in the market. Morgan & Morgan in our area is going to be here. You're going to see them in the paid ads. And then second, which is one I want you to pay the most attention to, I think, is the map pack. And the people that show up here are going to be the ones who have the best organic SEO methods. So they're really pushing content on their website. They're trying to show up because they are the authority in that area, right? So their website shows that they know all about car accidents. They know all about truck accidents. So when you type in truck accident, they're going to show up in the map pack because their website is the best for information on that. And then once we kind of see who is our organic competitors, who are big ad spend competitors, we'll actually be able to dive in a little bit on what words are they showing up for that I should be. Why am I not on page one for bankruptcy attorney in New York City? Maybe it's because we need to do organic search or organic SEO practices. There's a couple different things that will contribute, and we can talk about that later. But we'll be able to see that, oh, our competitors are showing up here. That's why they're getting those clients.
Yeah, and this is an area, and I guess we have a workshop, right? Just to start, kind of like, I think we put in there like Google, your practice area, your city. Again, this isn't going to be as perfect as if you were there and back home, but just start looking at this because we'll do audits. One of the first things we often do when we work with a new client is like kind of do a really deep audit, and we'll kind of be like, oh, and here's your competitors, and they're like, those aren't my competitors, it's like you think about the people that you maybe see in court occasionally, or you just kind of think, oh, these are my competitors in town. But if you're going to try to drive business from online, the people showing up online are your competitors online. I mean, it sounds like it should be obvious, but we get pushback all the time saying, well, that's not a competitor, they suck, right? Come on, let's be honest. Like, how many of you look at the search engines and go, how is that person there, right? Yeah, thank you. So, those are your competitors online. So what we need to do is learn from that, right? So what are they doing different? What can we find that maybe is an opportunity to have a keyword, like you had keyword gaps there, right? So the keyword gap thing could be, everybody's like going all in on car accidents, but man, nobody's talking about motorcycle accidents, or only 2 people are, and we could probably beat them pretty quick. So, can you find some keywords we can start with? Or if you had multiple practice areas, which practice area has the easiest, way to kind of jump past some people? That's where it's a good way to start. Again, getting the data. This is all about understanding your presence, understanding where you're at, understanding what your next steps should be. This isn't like go dominate the market tomorrow out of the session, right? You need to understand this information and think about it before you can go take the first step. So, take time. I think, pull up your phone, look at some competitors, write them down, and then because we're going to start getting into what is makes you unique from those competitors, right? So, you can now kind of go, all right, I did a little bit of branding thought. I did a little bit of ideal client avatar. I've now looked at my competitors, right? And then so Jamie, I mean, you worked on the client side where we were, doing the actual work. And that's the next thing we do is like, oh, well, how do we take all this data now and say, I can be different here, like quickly, and then eventually get to that differentiation I want, right? So there's these opportunities, like not everybody is everything to Google, so you can go find that one piece where we can work it. And again, we're talking heavy on a Google search angle here because that's typically where online starts, and it's a good place to go if you don't have tons of money to throw into a market on ads. So that's why you'll hear us talk about search a lot. But yeah, I'll let you kind of talk about what you want to do here.
Yeah, so it's just important that after we've thought about branding and we've looked at our competitive market and we talk about our ideal client avatars, that we step back, we think about what can we learn from our current clients to get us there too, right? So our current clients can also tell us through reviews and through working with them on a daily basis what they like about us that they didn't like about the firm that they interviewed with first, or they had the initial consult and didn't end up signing with them. So don't be afraid to ask questions and understand your unique value proposition, UVP. That's like another industry term. I try to spell them out so that I don't just use like letters the whole time we're here. But your unique value proposition, and just utilize the people. Also, don't undervalue the value of a colleague's opinion on who you are in the market, because they can kind of see it from an outside perspective if they're not in the firm, and they can tell you why someone would come to you and not another person in that industry.
Yeah, you want to, and we'll get into FAQs here a little bit too, but you really want to get shocked. If you're at a backyard barbecue with like a bunch of your friends or family members, ask one of them to explain to the other one what you do. Right? And hopefully more than just they're a lawyer, right? Like, well, so how do I help people? What, and you can start hearing the words people are using to describe you and go, oh, maybe there's some words I need to think about, so. Yeah,
if you're my mom, if I ask her what I do, she just types. She pretends to type. I'm like, she's a nurse. So there's clearly a misunderstanding there.
All right, so now we get to dig into
the numbers,
analytics. So we kind of went through a little bit of brand, ideal clients, looking at your competitive landscape. Now let's make sure that we have a good sense of what our current metrics are on our online presence. And again, most of this is going to be your website. Let's start there. We did use Moz to kind of see where our directories were. We'll talk about Google Business Profile in a little bit. So this is like thinking about the data that our website is telling us and can give us to influence strategy and things we're going to be doing. So first of all, show of hands, who does not have Google Analytics on their website set up?
Oh, good. Oh, okay, so just a few.
Who doesn't know if they have Google Analytics set up or not? Okay, that probably should have been the better question. All right. So if you don't, we literally have like a step-by-step guide. I think you pulled it right out of the academy, right?
Yep.
So we have a step-by-step guide. Did the timer just change?
Huh? Yeah, we're good.
So there's a step-by-step guide that walks us through setting up Google Analytics, and so if you leave here, go back, you can get Google Analytics set up on your website, or call your webmaster and just say, hey, is Google Analytics set up? No? Can you set it up? And I'd recommend setting up under your account. So get Google Analytics set up, and then we're going to go through a bunch of things that you should be thinking about when you go into Google Analytics. And it can give you a lot of great data. And if you have, this is the type of stuff like we pull out and we walk through with clients, right? So if you have an agency or something, ask for some of this information. Say, hey, where are we here and where are we there? I heard this is an important thing to track. Can you tell me? Okay. So let's dive in.
Yep. So when you set up Google Analytics, it's going to start collecting information about the success of your website. And with that, you also want to set up some extra things called goals. There is a step-by-step on how to set up goals in the workbook as well, like towards the end of the Google Analytics setup. And when we do that, we're going to get a couple metrics. And I want to go over quickly what each of these metrics are, because it's extremely important to understanding and evaluating your landscape, that you're able to look at this data and be like, oh, that's what went up this time, right? Or that's where I'm kind of struggling. So first is users. That is the number that's initiated in a session. So think like reach. So think this was in front of this many people, right? Like this many people saw it. Okay, but a new user is a first-time visitor. That means if they might have seen it 17 times, but they're only going to count as one person. And then a session is the total number of times a user visited your site. So one user might have 5 sessions if they're like going back and forth on whether or not they're going to hire you or the other attorney. Then we also want to look at these aren't going to be like explicitly laid out in Google Analytics, but these are things to consider as you're looking at the data, right? So we want to consider how much time the data has been collected. So say we just set up Google Analytics today. We're not going to know tomorrow how our site's doing, right? We're not even going to know probably this month how our site's doing. We're going to give it some time, see the trends in the data, and then make some corrections, and then give it another period of time and see the trends, whether or not it goes up or down after that. Because that's how you're going to know whether or not your efforts are actually making a positive impact.
Yeah, I mean, a rule of thumb, I mean, if you're getting less than 50 sessions a day, give it at least a month to kind of know like what your actual kind of average kind of rates are on things. Once you're kind of getting to like, a few hundred sessions a day, we can even do like some tests within a couple weeks on things when somebody's at that point. But when you're first starting off, you're not going to, you may not have a lot of sessions, but you want to get some data just to kind of like start knowing where we're at.
And then count is the number of data points that are statistically relevant. And like that's a bunch of fancy talk for like, we're not going to include the outliers. We're going to look at like the actual trend of the data over a period of time to see like whether or not it's a positive overall impact or a negative overall impact. Sometimes like Google updates and stuff, something will just spike or drop. And it's really nothing that you did. It's just Google made some changes about how they do things. And then it'll kind of even back out and you'll start to see the effects of your marketing again. And then lastly, with the goals, you're going to set up specific goals for your company and your firm. But you want to make sure that your growth goal is consistent with what the data is telling you. And then bounce rate is one that I think gets ignored. And it does offer a lot of valuable information, but bounce rate is not, they're gonna have a bounce rate. Your goal is not 0, right? But bounce rate can be an indicator that what you have on the page isn't necessarily matching what's in the meta descriptions and in the titles. And so if bounce rate is high, make sure your content is consistent with what, so like, on the Google page when it says, car accident attorney, read here more to hear more about what we can do to help you. And then it goes to the page that's actually about truck accidents. That's going to create a bounce because that's not the information that they actually needed. So we're going to make sure that those two things are consistent.
Yeah, bounce rate, it is one of those things where I did say like analytics will help us with your website, but think of your website as individual pages. That's how Google looks at it. Every page is kind of its own thing. At the end of the day, like they're sending you to a page. So they want to know information about that. So bounce rate is great for, this page does really well. This page bounces. Maybe I can learn from this page to make this one better. Just, it's a really good data point. Maybe it's more of an advanced, when you get there, but it's great to talk about.
And then you also see that there's a couple different channels that are measured in, this is technically Google Search Console, but that's another thing you can set up to help understand like the landscape and how well your website and online presence is doing. But you're gonna see that there's different channels such as organic, meaning that the users were driven by organic search of terms. So they put in something in Google and they ended up on your website. Yeah,
and just so everybody's clear, like organic, because I'll sometimes see like reports from other people like, their person said like we're awesome, because organic can also be somebody typed your name in, so it could be a referral. Like organic search, a referral will show up in organic search, even though there's a thing called referral. But like if somebody like is referred to you, they likely go to Google to look you up before they call you. It's just a thing we do now, right? Like think about the last time you just called somebody directly based on a business card somebody handed you. 8 years ago, so like people are going to Google you. That is an organic search. In the beginning, I bet a lot of your organic searches, if you haven't really focused a lot of time on SEO, a lot of your organic searches are probably your name or your firm name or somebody on your staff's name.
And then direct is going to be they actually went in and typed in your URL. So they found some advertising material probably and actually typed it in at the top. And then referral is a little different than like referrals in terms of like somebody told them to go to your website, and more so it is they went somewhere like a directory like we talked about before, or maybe it was some other like newspaper article that you were cited in that had your website linked to it. And they clicked on that link and that led them to your website. And then lastly is social. We all know the Facebook, Twitter, even Instagram. They can all lead to your website, and that'll also be recorded here. When we're doing this, we're actually measuring the success of landing pages. And what we mean by that is that it's the page we're driving traffic to so that they can understand who you are as a firm and what you're going to do to help them with their problem. Right? So when we're analyzing whether or not our landing pages are working, we're showing impressions, which is the number of times that landing page actually showed up on a search engine result. So maybe you showed up in the first couple pages of car accident attorney with that specific landing page that you made for car accident attorneys, right? And then clicks is the number of times users clicked that result and then landed on that page. And then average position is where you actually showed up on that page. So like maybe you consistently show up as number 6, and if you just tweak some things, you might end up in that map pack. Right? And then behavior is how the users are interacting with that page. This is how it would show up in analytics as well. And then again, with goal completions, you can actually track conversions. And by conversions, we mean that someone who visited your website actually filled out a form or called you or contacted you in some way. Probably one of those two ways.
Yeah, I think in the packet we actually put like how to set up a goal.
Yeah.
At its most basic couple levels. Call tracking software can help you connect into that as well. But it is great to be able to in analytics kind of go, oh, conversions increased because we did something, right? And you can in analytics, like as an agency, we'll even go, oh, we changed a bunch of content on this page. We'll put a note there, and then hopefully we see within the next 3 months that some of the metrics changed, right, in the way we want them.
So just as like a final wrap up for conversions, you should see a gradual increase. Like leads will come, you'll start to see a little bit more form fills come up, and then all of a sudden, so those are conversions in terms of like analytics, and then all of a sudden you'll see a couple more people are calling and actually reaching out to you and engaging and starting those initial consults. And then it's up to you and your intake process at that point to convert into an ideal client.
Yeah, and we so there's concept, like in kind of like marketing and one business in general are, your kind of like leading indicators and lagging indicators. So getting a client is actually a lagging indicator in kind of marketing perspective, right? So a leading indicator for us is often are sessions increasing? Oh, that's good, right? If sessions are increasing, then we're doing the work to get the website in front of the right eyeballs and stuff. Okay, sessions are increasing. How are our conversions? Well, our conversions are going down. All right, well, maybe we're in front of the wrong eyeballs, right? Or maybe something's wrong in the content. So we're looking at, like sessions and users, and we're looking at conversions. And so all that is getting into like, are consults happening? Those should all be leading indicators. If all those are going up and everything's going well on the consult side, then you should have more clients, right? So we don't want to go, oh, hey, I got more clients, my marketing's working. We want to be able to kind of look earlier on, did that test, did that content, did that change affect sessions, affect users, affect click-through rate? So those things, we can then make adjustments before it's too late, right? Before we go, yep, didn't get any clients this quarter. Right, so we want leading indicators, and that's why we talk about sessions and users and stuff, even though it sounds like boring and analytical. That's why we talk about it.
Yep. And then I wanted to give you this because it's kind of like a sneak peek to how to increase conversions and leads total. So lead magnets are an excellent way to get data about people who are probably going to be good clients for you because it's set up your ideal client, right? So it's some valuable piece of information that you can put on your webpage and then put it behind a gate, which is like a form like this, so that they have to put in their information to see the awesome material that you have behind that gate. So a lot of times, like we work with some bankruptcy attorneys, and I'm like, what do people ask you in your initial consults, right? Oh, maybe what should I bring to my initial consultation with a bankruptcy attorney? Because there's a ton of documents that you bring to a bankruptcy consultation, right? So put that behind a gate. It's going to make that person feel more comfortable about reaching out to an attorney because now they know that what to expect, and then now you have their information and you can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm here to help solve your problem.
Yeah, and if it's funny because Mark Britton today was talking about intermediaries and how Google's actually an intermediary. One of the things I love about those kind of like lead magnets and gated things is you are getting rid of the intermediary and now you have their information and you get to kind of own that data, right? If you buy leads from a lead source, if you're relying on Google Ads for all your leads, whatever, like you're using, or you're relying on directories, right? You're using an intermediary, their brand, their knowledge, their control of the customer wins. Lead magnets are a great way to early on get some data about a customer. So, like somebody fills out a form to get a free book or something, and then you have their data now and you can send them email campaigns, right? So that's a perfect example of a lead magnet.
Yep.
Call tracking is something that used to be, I got fought on this all the time. Like, I don't want call tracking numbers. I had a bad experience with call tracking numbers. I think at this point, if you're not using call tracking, you're just losing a ton of data. Not just the data that you can get into Google Analytics and get information, but auto recording where things are coming from, how many times they're calling, did they call from a cell phone number or not, being able to do text messaging within it. Call tracking has gotten so advanced to the point where like if there's larger firms and ones that have full intake centers, the call tracking is actually using AI to go through the calls and kind of like highlight who's doing a good job and a bad job on intake, by the way. So like it's getting that advanced. So at this point, if you're not using call tracking, you're just, a laggard in that kind of chart of like, if you ever seen the Crossing the Chasm book, whatever, it's like early adopters and then whatever, and like laggard is like almost at the end. Call tracking is just out there. Use it, take advantage of it. You can connect it in your analytics. So when calls come in from your website, it came from the website. If you put a phone number on like a billboard, it came from the billboard. Like you can kind of track a little bit to kind of see where things are coming from, what's working. Highly, highly recommend it. I think CallRail's here actually. We use a CallRail partner, CallRail, big fan. I think they're actually here.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you have any questions about call tracking, go find them.
And then lastly, just as kind of like a user beware, there's last click attribution, meaning you've done all this work. You've worked on social media, you've worked on your content on your webpage, and they've probably seen you multiple times, right? Like they're starting to become aware of who you are as a brand, and they're interacting with you more and more before they actually need you as an attorney. So just beware of last click attribution. Just because somebody is converting on your website doesn't mean they didn't also find you on social media, or they didn't also see your ad that you paid for on Google. Like there's a ton of different things that can contribute to why a person actually ended up signing with you and filling out a form.
Yeah, so if you have your data over time, you can get a little better sense of, I started this new thing and things went up. So you can kind of get a better sense of, that probably had some causal relationship to this thing happening. But it's when people turn everything on and go, I guess my ads are rocking, and it's like, well, actually it was referrals and they typed your name and somebody's bidding on your name and they just clicked your name and the ad came through, right? So there's a lot of different ways you could have, attribution incorrect. So it's one of those things where having that trend of data helps you understand this. I just don't want people getting the trap of the last thing that happened before the person became a client. A lot of times, a lot of times people don't realize this, but think about your own behavior. You go to something, you search on it, a call comes in, you leave the tab open because we all leave 50 tabs open to go back to the things we want to do, right? And then, 3 days later, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. And then you find that tab and you go through it and you read it and you're like, that's interesting. Let me fill out that form. Okay, great. I got a lead magnet now. I'm downloading, I'm reading my ebook and whatever. Okay, I like that. Let me click on it. And then suddenly the ebook gets all the credit. Right, and it's like, well, actually, they did this, then they did this, and they did this beforehand. So Google Analytics can try to track some of that, but with security and people being really smart about their browsers and stuff, you can't track as much of the user as you used to. So again, trends of data are your friend.
And then lastly, just all of this is really to say that you need to track your success, right? The ultimate goal is to increase the amount of clients, and it can be to maybe increase the amount of clients so you can hire more employees, right? Like there's other goals that come along with it, but the ultimate goal is to increase the amount of exposure you have to your ideal client avatar. And then, and when you get a new client, it's important to know where those clients came from so that we can continue to make adjustments to the parts that are not as strong and continue to improve parts that are actually working.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, we didn't talk about this in the beginning, and I'm sure April and Tyler will talk about tomorrow, but like your marketing strategy needs to map to your business goals, right? So like you got to understand where you want your firm to go, and then marketing. You don't just start doing marketing and then let it take your firm somewhere, right? So really think about that. So why do you want to increase clients, or do you not want? I mean, we've had clients come to us and say, I want to stay solo. I want this many clients. I've got a bunch of clients, but I want more of this type of client. And it was really more of a changing their marketing to get different, same revenue, same everything. They just wanted to have a happier set of clients.
So this is a part in our workbook where we actually have a download available to you. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's like a quick reference to how you're doing and how your analytics data is actually measuring up over time. And then it also has available to you how to track where your leads came from, and like the clients that you sign, are they being profitable and all that stuff. So it's a great resource for you to understand whether or not you're attracting the right type of clients and whether or not your marketing efforts are working.
Yeah. Is the URL actually in the workbook?
So the URL is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for.jngf.com/Clio2022. And then you can grab that Excel spreadsheet. And then it has it's just again, a way to kind of take stuff from your analytics or maybe your intake system or whatever and start tracking and being able to see some trends. It's things that, like we would do, via our systems and stuff, and then report back to a client on some kind of quarterly basis. But it's a way for you to kind of start and say, let me get the data, start tracking on some regular basis, then I can start making some decisions instead of just throwing stuff up on a wall and hope some things stick, right? We're trying to be a little bit more analytical about it.
And then, so now that we know what our data's telling us, why is it important? There's a lot that goes into why understanding your digital landscape is important. And one of those things is that in 2005, online was a website, right? For attorneys, if you had a website, you were cutting edge. You were doing it. But now that's not the case. So if you're not also on all of these platforms and probably more, you're really not doing digital well anymore. You have to be convenient to be found by your clients or your potential new clients.
Yeah, I mean, back in 2005, I think you literally typed URLs in the browser. I mean, when was the last time you typed, something.lawfirm.com? Nobody's doing that. So yeah, leveraging all these other online sources is important. Yeah.
And then consumers actually expect you to be available. So this is an expectation that they have. It's not just something that it would be nice. No, if they're not going to try hard to find you, they're either going to be there or you're not. So clients prefer online, and this is actually taken from last year's Clio Trends report, and it's an excellent example of how digital tools and the digital landscape has benefited the legal community a lot, and it's benefited the clients of the legal community a lot, and they want it. They want to engage with you more because you have these tools at your disposal. And we don't want to do it alone. We want to utilize these tools in as many practice components as we can. So, for example, we use Smith AI even at GNGF, and it's a great way to handle intake without it having to be on our plate every single day. So utilizing tools to you said it great today, where you're you have to know when to fire yourself as a manager and utilize a tool because it's gonna do a better job at that one specific thing, and your time is better spent somewhere else where your expertise lies.
Yeah, and I think the 24/7 calling is something that it's just again, to me, another no-brainer. Mm-hmm. If you're not using some kind of tool or service to do 24/7, hopefully this will convince you. If you Google somebody at 7 o'clock on a Friday night and you Google a bunch of, law firms, the map pack's gonna come up and it's gonna show the law firms. And if their hours on their website say we're 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever, and it's 7 o'clock, it literally comes up and it says closed. The word says closed on your law firm, So if you go to a 24/7 answering service, you put, we're open 24 hours, somebody's answering the phone 24 hours and can, grab their information, get the intake, get it, maybe even an appointment scheduled if you have a Calendly tool or something like that, or a Clio scheduler. They can handle all of that. Now, and this is a client told me this. It's like somebody called them and said, "Oh yeah, I signed up with you because you had a lot of reviews and you were the only law firm open." It was like, yeah, Friday at 6 o'clock or something, right? Everybody was closed because that's what their website said. That's what their Google business profile said. So yeah, there's like these digital tools have other ramifications, and so hopefully, like Abby, Ruby, Smith, I think they're all 24/7 now, multiple languages, I think most of them. So those are great tools. The chat bots and stuff, I don't know if you want to call that 24/7, but if somebody's answering the phone and can schedule an appointment and do some intake process, I think you're fair.
So the workbook is actually going to have a couple different areas in which attorneys are able to outsource using digital tools. So I just want you to think about your firm and what makes sense to begin outsourcing so that your time is spent where you want it to be spent. And attorneys have different goals. So your goal might be to be the manager of all the attorneys underneath of you. And if that's the case, then you maybe don't want to outsource some of these things. But if your goal is to spend more time practicing instead of running the day-to-day operations of your firm, these are going to be some great areas for opportunity for you.
Yeah, and as you guys heard today, I mean, like the legal tech landscape, there's probably a tool out there. If you have a problem that you'd like to solve and somebody else to do for you, there's probably a tool out there. Like, it's crazy.
And half the time, the answer is Clio, especially after the keynote today. We've learned our landscape. We've learned how to evaluate our landscape, and we've learned why it's important to be active digitally. But there's some things we want to cover and not quick tips, because we have multiple sessions on all of these things in the Academy. It's half the Academy, but we could go on this topic for days. But some things that may have a direct impact on some of those numbers we were talking about. So where should we start? And these are a few key areas of improvement that I think have a direct impact on whether or not you're going to start getting more and more clients. And the first is search engine optimization. So I'm sure most of the people here has probably heard of search engine optimization at this point, but for those of you who need a refresher, it's basically the method and the science behind showing up as close to number one position on Google, right, as you possibly can. The ideal goal being the first page in that map pack.
Yeah, I love the word science there. I try to explain to people marketing is a science. Actually, I got a bachelor's science degree to my marketing degree, right? It's a science. It's not math. So it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's test. Some things work. Let's do more of that. Oh, let's test some other things. Let's try. So science is a lot of testing and hypothesis and reading the data. Marketing is more of a science. So that's an interesting word on the SEO side.
Yeah, SEO is also a huge topic. We cover this in probably 6 or 7 sessions in the Academy. You can go on a tangent on this for days, but we're just going to give you some highlights.
All right.
So first, creating content which is strategic is key to improving your firm's online position. It's one of the best methods we have at our disposal for SEO for law firms. And first, I want to say this: we have to put ourselves in our client's shoes. As we said before, with the car accident example, we need to bridge that gap of education between what we know and what the clients really need at the time that they're searching for us. And it might not be stating off the elements of negligence. As much as we love it, we know it, it's probably not the best use of the content on our website.
Yeah, the what are they struggling with is something that, I'll just give an example for family. The struggling is not, I need the divorce and I want the paperwork done and I want to get through the law system. It's, what are my kids going to think? How much time am I going to spend with my kids? How am I going to, where am I going to live? These are the struggles people have. And there's a lot of great content on law firm websites that are getting them ranked on those terms, and they're becoming clients, right? So think about the problems they have, and you want to be there, not somebody else on Google.
So in the workbook, based on what Mark says, we've actually given you some space to start brainstorming frequently asked questions. We find that frequently asked questions are what people are asking Google to answer for them and then landing up on law firm websites, right? So take a second, think of your initial consults. Like, your clients ask the best questions right when they come to see you, because that's what they're thinking before they contact you too. So think of those consults and maybe record yourself answering a 2-minute response to that question and then dispersing it all across the different platforms. Like, there's so much utilization you can have from just what your clients actually ask you on a daily basis.
Yeah, so think about, in the workbook, what are people asking you? I think that's, a ton of great ideas, right? It's like from your intake process, the first consultations, through the process, right? Like every step of the way, like there's always like an extra question or two. How many of those can you get out in front of? Maybe put all those together and now you have a guide that they could download and as a lead magnet, right? Yeah. So the other good thing is Google, again, I'm trying to give you some free tools. We use a ton of like tools that just help us like identify content, and we have to pay for them and stuff. They're looking, like I said, like AI bots kind of saying, here's all the things that people ask, and if they ask this, they also ask this. But Google has done some of the work for us. So if you're just getting started, great place to start. And by the way, in SEO, you'll hear like links, and links aren't going to hurt, but we have proven time and time again in every market we go into that doing content well not only helps drive traffic, but helps that traffic convert better on the website. Again, it's not just getting the session to the website, right? We want to think about conversions and goals. Goal was to get a client. So you want somebody to convert on your website. If you have good content that's talking to the ideal client in the way that, like their problems and helping them solve them, that's going to be somebody who picks up the phone and calls you more likely than just you put some content on there to get like some backlink from fortune.com that somebody paid you for, whatever. So, links aren't bad. There's a place and they're needed, but don't just go all in on the link game because that's what somebody told you SEO is. Content, I think, is way better long-term. Every time Google does some crazy release, I feel like our clients end up doing better because we're trying to do it the right way. We're solving real problems that your clients have, right? So you can leverage Google. They're trying to give you some of this information, right? So you can type in a keyword, and Google will tell you, people also ask this, right? They'll say, here's some things related to that search. Right, so Google, if you do a search for like your practice area, near me, or just think about a question. I actually like doing this better with maybe than divorce lawyer, but like think like the questions, like what's one of your frequently asked questions? Put that in Google and let that send you down a rabbit trail of what people also ask, right? Because those are questions that you probably go, oh yeah, I get that all the time. I forgot about that one. Right, and so then write an article about it. Add it to your. So we talked about like the landing pages, like the practice area page, like you talked about, like your real estate or your car accident. You can add frequently asked questions on those pages and make them nice and long and deep and even more likely to show up. So it's a good place for frequently asked questions. They don't have to be on their own in their own little section. You can just add them to those deep pages in the beginning. Have less pages on your website, but more content that meets the person's need. Over time, you can add your frequently asked questions in other spots. But Answer the Public's a free, was a free service.
You get like a couple free.
Yeah, you get a couple. Yeah, it's like first one's free, right? Yeah. So the Answer the Public, you can type something in and it'll even give you all the, if you type this keyword in like DUI, it'll say, here's all the things people ask with a who in front of it, a how in front of it, a what in front of it. This is kind of neat. You can get a lot of these are just, to kind of get your mind going of, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that could work. Oh, when I see that question, it reminds me of these 3 other questions I totally forgot about. So like, this is just great to start getting content. And then once we have the content, there are some technical things we want to think about for the website. And the 2 biggest ones are, first one is write good content that talks to your ideal client, right? We're not trying to impress them with legal terms. We're solving the problems and the questions they have. Then we want to make sure we have a title tag on the actual website. And if you don't know what that is, like if you use WordPress or something like that, there'll probably be a spot for a title tag. That needs to map to what the content is you're trying to ask oftentimes a good title tag would be the question, right? Like start with that. If it's too long, you can trim it down. And we have like more detail. Like I said, the Academy has a lot of stuff on this too. Meta descriptions is when you do the search. We have the example here. The title is the top part. The meta description is the come on to my website, right? It's like that little hint of what you want them to see so they get excited to click through. Because that's one of 10 other things or more. If they're on mobile, they're scrolling like 3 pages, maybe they see 20 something, right? So that's going to be one of many things. So you're trying to use that title tag and that meta description to convince somebody to click. Unfortunately, I'm just going to throw this out there, and it's going to like make sense to some people and not others. Google is trying to be smarter, and if they don't think your meta description matches your content or even your title tag, they're going to change it. They're going to grab some headline on your page and go, it's this. And sometimes that is okay. Sometimes it's like, what the heck were they thinking? These are robots, right? It's artificial intelligence going and doing it. It's not like a person saying, I think I'm smarter than you. But again, that's why you want those title tags and descriptions to really match that content. That's why I like to say, like, good title tag is the question, and then the title of the page is the question. That's a good, that's going to get a good link between Google. Content, be consistent. I'll actually be honest, we used to have this whole thing of like, you need to regularly have content come out like every month, drip 4 pages, drip 4 more pages. Now, we will work with clients and say, we're going to do a lot of deep content in the first 3 or 4 months, like, good 1,000, 2,000 word, practice area pages, maybe a couple of sub pages, really good frequently asked questions, a great homepage, and then we'll sit. And we're going to see, how Google reacts, what pages are working, what's not. Oh, that page is working, great. Let's link from that page over to these new pages we're going to now create. The whole idea of like 4 blog posts, then 4 blog posts, and then 4 blog posts, and then you have to read 4 blog posts and approve 4 blog posts for, whatever the number is that, people sign up for. Like, we don't do that anymore because it doesn't give us, we can't use the data to drive better content. We don't just like go on our rote content. So I think that the whole consistency thing is check your data and be regular and update things, but don't just try to like add stuff because somebody said, I need to keep adding stuff. So I'm going to give you a buy on that. So if somebody said, you got to blog every day or every week or something like that, tell them Mark said no. And then just write better content for the ideal client on the practice area pages to begin with. To start there. So the question was, if I have I have pages that are working really well, and you said link to that, and that's great, and you have pages that aren't working well because the analytics saying nobody's visiting it, so Google's not showing it, do we want to keep it on the website or not? Was the question, right? Yes. So if the page has a purpose that you would send somebody to, maybe it's linked over to get a lead magnet or something like that. So maybe Google's not sending to it a lot, but it's getting 1 or 2 because of that. That's fine. If it's just dying on the vine, there could be an opportunity to look at 3 or 4 pages that you could combine and see how that does. And so maybe it's a length thing, or you look at that page and say, well, these are the ones that are working, this one's not. Maybe it's just this hyper-competitive keyword, and it's just going to take more time, right? So there is an identification of that, but if it's thin, small content, like it's 400 or 500 words, it maybe isn't totally of solving a problem. It's not something somebody really is probably searching that much, or if they are, there's pages that are way better out there when you Google it. Maybe combine some of those pages into a nice longer page to be better than what's out there.
So the follow-up to that is, Google doesn't penalize you because you've taken something off your website that they're not promoting anyway. That's not going to hurt your other.
Correct. Now, and there are some, if the page did exist and you may want to redirect it just in case it got linked to somewhere, there's some redirect things you can do that are like a kind of underlying technical thing. And WordPress has plugins if you can do that, but there's ways to do it right at the server level to redirect those pages to make sure that it's okay. And then Google's like, all right, that page doesn't exist. I just go over here now. Thanks for telling me. We're good. So yeah, it's totally fine. We actually do our process we do in that. Like during the audit step is also called keep, kill, combine. We're looking at analytics, we're looking at all the content, we're deciding what to keep, what to totally kill because it just doesn't make sense. Like somebody was told, write 400 word blog posts about community events that mean nothing to your ideal client. So, okay, well, let's just kill all those, right? And then combine, it's like, oh, this is really good content, but it's just really, like if we combine these 4 or 5 things into like, one long page of frequently asked questions for this topic area, that combination could rank better and over time often does. So we've taken thousands of pages and cut them down to like 420 and the calls went through the roof. So it definitely works. Good question.
And then in addition to SEO and creating content, we also want to say that Google Business Profile is the directory of all directories, like so much so that it is your second homepage, maybe even your first. Some people don't even visit your website and they'll call directly from Google Business Profile. So it's uber important that we have the information correct, as we do on all the other directories. And in your workbook, you'll actually see that there's just some things to consider when updating your Google Business Profile. And then you just make sure you like mark those off and you have updated them and like regularly keep updating them, because consistency is also key with Google Business Profile.
Yeah, and again, book covers, we got lots of stuff on our website, video stuff. I think there's another session I saw on Google Business Profile. Maybe it's only how Clio integrates to it, but if you need more questions around that or have a question about it, I do recommend regularly updating it. So if you add some cool stuff to a frequently asked question, you can add questions in your Google Business Profile and start looking at your Google Business Profile analytics. They don't come through your website analytics, which kind of sucks. But there's another place you go, Google Insights. Definitely look at that. A lot of people are shocked that if they set up a Google Business Profile like a year ago and they go look at their insights, they're like, wait, I was getting calls I wasn't kind of really recognizing was tied to Google Business Profile, because they'll tell you this person clicked on your phone number on a mobile phone, right? In your profile, and it happens all the time. A lot of times it's referrals or a client trying to reach back out, but I want to make sure we get to intake. I think there's a session on reviews as well. Reviews, if you guys didn't get the point today, reviews are really important.
Yeah.
Right, 50-something%. We've been saying it forever. I also want to say one thing about reviews. Read your reviews not just because I want more reviews and I should get reviews, but read your reviews as, it's people telling you about your brand. It's people telling you where a couple holes are in your operation and processes that you can. So don't just get mad at a negative review. If there's something in there where it's like, oh, I just, took them forever to get back to me, or whenever I called, I had to wait on hold, or something, like maybe there's an opportunity, right? So don't just get mad at reviews if they're like a 3-star or something. There's often an opportunity. If you get a review that's like 1 star and it's because it was opposing counsel, client or whatever, talk to somebody. There's a chance you can get that pulled down. But most of the time, I think it's good opportunity to learn. But I want to make sure we talked about intake. This is something I will get on a soapbox more than I've done on any other soapbox yet today, which I had a few.
Only like 7.
Yeah. So intake is something that drives me crazy because it's the spot where your prospects can go to die or to thrive, right? Intake is when somebody finally picks up the phone or finally reaches out via chat or finally sends a text message or finally goes, fills out a form. I just mentioned, or goes to Facebook Messenger, whatever they're reaching out to you, because that's how many ways you got to track, by the way. Like they're reaching out to you all kinds of ways. If you don't have the process dialed in to track that lead coming in and knowing you're following up, not just, I called them back. I guess if they really care, they'll just, reach back out. But like you're following up multiple times and it's in a system and you can see, oh, we followed up on these leads 5 times. We followed up on these leads only 2 times. It's surprising that the people we followed up with 5 times had a higher conversion rate, right? Like you can actually use the data in these systems. And so you've got Clio Grow, obviously, like these legal CRM type systems that help manage intake. Lawmatics is a great tool we use a lot as well. If you're not on Clio, maybe you're on another tool. Like I know there's some other practice management specific legal CRMs that tie to them, like Lead Docket and stuff. So those tools, this is coming from a marketer that sells marketing services. Work on those tools, get your intake dialed in before you spend too much more money on marketing. Right, I think like April and Tyler probably say marketing strategy. Number 1 is how's your intake. Make sure you're getting that figured out. We've got clients who have, people have hired people to just handle intake. And they're maybe 3-4 person firms. Like they're not crushing it in terms of oh, I got 50 lawyers I got to send people to, but they're hiring realizing that intake is not a paralegal. Like an intake professional is a salesperson. By the way, let's also call it what it is. Intake is sales. Okay, somebody's calling you looking for services, and there's like 50 competitors out there that they could have chosen and still could. So when they call you, they haven't decided to hire you yet, right? You have to convince them. And oftentimes the best person to convince them is not during the consultation, it's getting them to the consultation, right? So intake software can also help send text messages to remind them they have a consultation with you. Like, there's just so much good stuff in these legal CRM tools now that you should definitely check them out. If you're not doing them, I would say don't spend money on me, spend money on that first, right? Like this is how important it is to your marketing. You're wasting dollars if you haven't figured this intake out. So I wanted to kind of get in that soapbox for a second. Melanie Leonard and I, Melanie is works for Streamline Legal. We host a podcast together. She does a lot of process and process improvement back end for law firms, implements Clio and Lawmatics and stuff. We do Clio and Lawmatics from the front end of like marketing coming into the leads and stuff. And so it's a natural thing. So we've done a couple podcast episodes on this. So if you have a question of like, what does he mean? Check out our podcast. We've got a couple of episodes on intake. It probably could help. So, all right. And I think in the spreadsheet, we've got some things in there about tracking leads and conversions and follow-up and that kind of stuff as well. So even if you don't have the intake system dialed in, know what that is. Know how many people came in as a lead, like a prospect, it's like fill out a form or whatever. How many people were followed up with? How many scheduled a consultation? How many attended a consultation, right? That could be different. Just because they scheduled doesn't mean they attend. You guys know that. And then from attending, what turned into a client. And then you can actually dial that back and say, all right, where did they come from? Because the ones that became a client, could have been the smallest lead source, but it just happened to be the best one, right? So the largest lead source may turn no clients and say, hey, stop spending money there, right? So this is the kind of stuff, again, we get back to data, we can drive the strategy and the tactics from the data.
And then another thing that can improve our numbers directly is conversion rate optimization. And conversion rate optimization is things that we can do to our website to entice clicking on form fills and on that phone call, so that it's never a barrier to entry when they're on our website. And setting that baseline for conversion rate optimization is essential. So once you know where your baseline is, that's when you start testing different conversion optimization tactics, and you can kind of see where your efforts are best suited and what's working. So these are some of the typical ways that you can adjust your conversion rates to make substantial changes. So improving your...
We'll probably get through here kind of fast, so maybe snap some pictures along the way, because I know we got...
I was just going to say, improving your headlines is one way. If your images are consistent with what's on the page, what actually is in the body copy, so using sections and titles to break up longer landing pages. Calls to action. Calls to actions is huge because you need to tell them to contact you. You need to tell them to click here to fill out a form so that they can set up a consultation. And like I said, call to action. So you just want to keep it short and simple, get to the point, and have them want to contact you.
So I know we just did we're always tracking. We have a channel on our Slack that our account manager's always bragging, look what this happened. There was just something, there was a conversion rate optimization test they just did for somebody where they changed, I think titles, image. Yeah. So they basically changed, they realized that the ideal client, the color scheme, the designer's that color scheme's probably not the best. And they're well, we kind of liked it, but we'll try anything. So we changed the color scheme, made it a little bit warmer color for the ideal client. They took a lot of big, long paragraphs and bulleted them, changed some titles, and I think one of the bigger things they did was also move the call to action in more places. So instead of just having one form, it was at the bottom of the page, they had it in multiple places, had a button at the top that would take you to things. And they increased the clients it was they did a 3-week test, something like that? 3-week test. And it was almost double the same traffic, almost double. That was crazy.
They just made it easier.
That's unusual. That is really high. But even 10% more, just hitting the exact same website, doing the exact same traffic, no more work on SEO, no more work on content, just kind of cleaning up. So once you get these baselines dialed in and you've got some traffic coming, you got stuff, you can actually just play within the pages and actually sometimes get more clients without paying more money for marketing service. So. So.
There's actually an opportunity in your workbook to kind of brainstorm different areas that you can improve your conversion rate optimization. We actually just redid our website, so if you want some ideas, like honestly, take a look at our website. We've instilled a lot of what we recommend to our clients in our own website now.
Yeah, like testimonials, social proof, all that good stuff. Right? I think that was another thing we added, social proof, the other one. So finally, I think, kind of go through the wrapping up. If you have any questions, we've got a lot of resources. We're big on education. So, one of the reasons I think we're here talking is, we've got a YouTube channel you can check out. I got lots of information up there. I've got interviews with tons of people from legal tech and marketing and other stuff. Our podcast is actually doing pretty well. We're won an award. That was kind of cool. So the podcast is, I had somebody come up yesterday and say, "Oh my gosh, I love your podcast." I'm like, it's kind of, weird when somebody you've never met, but they come up, so it feels really cool. So check out the podcast. We will be down at our booth. We have a GNGF booth down there. So if you have any more questions and you want to dive into these content questions, do I keep, kill, combine, that kind of stuff, myself and Jamie are there. Josh and Kaylin is there as well. Kaylin and Jamie were, doing this for clients. Kaylin does it for clients. Josh has in the past as well. I'm just a pretty face sometimes. So I would talk to them. And then, please don't forget to grab the book. I just, it's got a lot more stuff, and there's some pretty pictures. It's all full color, so might as well grab it. Or you can pay $50 on Amazon. That works out for me too, but I would recommend just grabbing it. And 30 seconds, so not a lot of question time, but maybe one.
Look, do you think we should change our naming conventions if we're smaller firms? Instead of Jackson, Jackson, and Jackson, do the Jackson Personal Injury Law Firm?
That is a loaded question, and I've got 7 seconds to answer it. So, first of all, what is your check with your bar? Because sometimes you have to be very careful on naming,
Ethics.
depending on the state. Some can be whatever, and some are no, you have to have a name partner and whatever. So if you could pull it off. If you are 100%, I'm all in personal injury, and that's what I'm going to do, and you want to put this personal injury, it might have a bump on your SEO. It's going to be in every title tag, just putting your name in there. We've overcome that when going against people that do that. But it does give a little bit of a benefit. So if you're allowed to do it and that's all you want to do and you never want to do anything else other than that, you can go all in. But that's a business name. That's not I'm branding my website, right?
And if you're like the guy in the back where you practice a lot of areas of law, that might be more difficult to do.
Alex, I know we're at the wire. I had one more questions or one more? All right.
So back to that point, and maybe so my law firm name is one name, but my URL.
So that's okay, but on Google Business Profile, you would use your law firm name, and Google Business Profile is still earlier on in its search AI and that kind of stuff. So it can be gamed a little bit, and so people are getting away by changing their business name. I literally have seen Dentist Near Me LLC. Okay. Now they did make a bunch of changes, and that's slowly going away, that benefit. So that Dentist Near Me is just changed their name and now doesn't have a ranking. But I've seen people go to that extreme. So just be careful. I don't think you have to, but I do have to say that it is working right now.
Great.
Let's give a big round of applause to Mark and Jamie. Mark, Jamie, thank you for being so generous with how much content you prepared for us, not just today on stage, but also through the book, online. I can't believe how much we digested today, and I really appreciate, I saw so many people taking notes on pen, on their iPads, on their laptops. Mark and Jamie are here in our expo hall, which you can access just around the corner there, and I know they'd be excited to see you if you have more follow-up questions. And one more plug for tomorrow. There's a workshop happening at 10:15. I think it's in this room again, with Tyler and April from Nomos Marketing. I think it'll be a really good complement to this workshop. We talked a lot about KPIs and digital strategies here. The workshop tomorrow is more about the overall marketing strategy. So you want to think more about how to position yourself and how to fit in with your customers. I think that's a really good complement, and anyone that might want to check it out tomorrow. So once again, let's give a big round of applause to Mark and Jamie from GNGF.